So SafePass always, focused in our 15 years history to help companies move from an informal reactive to a proactive and optimized approach. And more than ever, this is critical and crucial for organizations to be more proactive, given that most of us got caught, almost all of us got caught off guard with the pandemic. So yeah, I mean, so one of the things that technology like SafePass helps you do is become more proactive and be optimized, that you need readjust those broken processes that Dan talked about, and understand your risk early that are emerging, and before they materialize, you're able to prevent or mitigate those risks at least. And so, the cost of findings under a pandemic is very high, right? If your auditors are reporting certain findings, whether it's in your financial reporting area that Dan touched on, or one of the risks around remote work, such as data access and privacy, they're all going to cost us, multiple folds more. And there's data to support that, the research to support that, but you have the best knowledge is what you have in-house. So just imagine the remediation efforts that you would have to go through for every finding that's reported, whether self-reported or independently reported by your external auditors. So I think having a proactive approach is critical. The way you get there is by having an automated audit risk and compliance framework. So if you're relying on spreadsheets and emails, or as Dan said, through some collaborative tools that are good to get started, but they're not sufficient for you to have a successful controls framework. So this will be the time to, when you assess your new risk, business continuity risk, let's say, document them into a framework that has the action plan, the remediation plan built in, so you can maintain whether it's a compliance with the specific regulations. Like I said, most of our customers are public. So it's simple as just doing your SOX certifications for 302, 404. If been doing those on a manual paper pencil, this would be the time to digitize those. Same thing with audit itself. So these are your fundamental, foundational blocks. And if you have all this automated, great, you're ahead of the curve. And so, maintain that and keep going with it. On top of that is access governance. So that's an area that a number of our customers are reaching out to you. I mentioned a story about a telecom company earlier that's going live today, or this week rather. I think tomorrow is their go live with one of our tools called iAccess to enable them to improve self-service user provisioning. But there's also, a number of our customers that are losing support from outdated software. A number of our customers use other third-party tools as well, and they're coming to us and saying, can we turn on extra, flip this additional switches in your software, because SafePass is fully integrated. So for example, if you're using a really old segregation of duty tool where the vendor has stopped supporting it, or it's just outdated, it doesn't cover all the risks that are in your latest digital platform, then this would be a good time to consider proactively upgrading that and mitigating any access risks that are elevated as a result of more people having access to support your infrastructure and your employees and staff. We recommend continuous controls monitoring because of the process risks that Dan identified earlier, and the studies that I presented before that. And that's because again, not only the remediation is hard, but also detection of risk is harder, right? Because you can't walk into the next cubicle and ask the person in payables whether they paid the same invoice twice because of mistake, because we're all working for home. So while collaboration is very important, it requires a more structure around your monitoring of that business activity. So what continuous controls monitoring will help you do in this environment, and all those controls that are in your policy procedure documents and your process flows, they will become alive, they'll become automated. So if there's a risk of a duplicate payment being made, or somebody just having difficulty using purchasing system and they need to get a new supplier onboarded and they skip a step, or they forgot to do the PO and they issue the PO, with the invoice comes in, those training issues that are happening and impacting maybe there's a shift in the workforce. So continuous monitoring around your key processes, your significant processes where, whether it's impacting your assets or your income, those are the areas where you'd want to enable that. And we provide a continuous monitoring workflow enabled system. So not only are you getting alerts, but also getting full remediation. So you can see in a closed loop manner how your organization is responding remotely to risks as they are adjusting to the new process and workflows. On top of that, obviously, is the process embedded control as well. I gave you an example again of that self-service access, but self-service can be a great tool right now to enable remote workers to be able to help themselves, especially as organizations under pressure to, cut cost, right? So right now is not a good time to go to CFO and ask for a bigger budget for headcounts. It's probably the opposite right now, unfortunately, for many organizations. So I think making your processes, whether it's your procurement process, making it more self-service, whether it's a customer order process. What I mean by that is you can leverage the self-service capabilities on our platform to create a workflow that is aligned with your current business need and integrates fully into your ERP system. So for example, if you're receiving invoices in your mailbox, whether it's your virtual mailbox or physical mailbox, you can do the approval process in SafePass workflow, and then when the final approval is done, it uploads that through an API into your ERP system, and it gets patched up for processing. So you've cut down all that sneaker net or the cubicle net that goes on, that used to go on in the past, and to make your overall process more sustainable. So embedded controls in the process is a big opportunity to mitigate the risk we just talked about earlier. And then finally, analytics, right? So having better visibility. The one thing that my clients are telling me now more than ever is the lack of visibility, the clarity they're looking for to forecast their business, to understand their customers, their supply chain, their employee workloads. So it's a significant fog on top of the business, which is difficult to make good decisions if you don't have clarity, right? So uh, that's an obvious fact. And so having analytics is really important because we are collecting the information around access and controls and monitoring and process audits and risks, and all of this can be combined together into nice dashboards that you can generate yourself. And then having all this data available helps you predict and give you more clarity on Q3 and Q4 of this year in 2021 to help guide your investors and your stockholders better. So predictive analytics is a way to help you become more proactive in managing risk. How we do that are through 30 plus products. We don't have them all on this sheet. Obviously, we can't fit them all, but this is a busy slide. So I'll just kind of highlight the ones I've talked about in the previous slide. So for example, audit management, risk and compliance management, and any kind of regulatory impact that you're seeing from lending facilities that you have taken advantage of. They may come with their own covenants and compliance issues. So be sure to check those and enable the compliance management capabilities. We do provide you a set of rules and repository that's been upgraded for the knowledge we've gathered during the pandemic over the last 60, 90 days through our partners and customers. So you will get an access to some content of whether it's business continuity policies that you need to beef up, or new rules you got to apply to your processes, or the risk and control matrix that needs to be revised. So it all comes with content, and that gets you a jump start towards improving your foundational challenges around policy and so forth that Dan talked about earlier. On top of that is your access control. So I've mentioned iAccess. That's the one product that we're seeing continuous demand for. And it's interesting, it's not just the remote access itself, although that's the big focus. It's also the auditing of access that's becoming challenging, right? So if you have ServiceNow or some other ticketing system where you're producing your, where you're producing the provisioning requests as part of your audit program, and then seeing how the auditors can confirm that that is exactly the access granted, you almost have to go through a reconciliation process. So a number of our customers are reaching out to us and asking us to help them through iAccess to eliminate that additional audit fatigue that's been created. So you go to your help desk, you ask for additional access, you're working remotely. Now that access is granted in your ERP system or some other data source. Now you got to reconcile the two to make sure that, just because you asked for access to general entries, you didn't get the access to also post those journal entries. And so that's creating a lot of burden on our auditors and therefore our finance and business community. And so we're seeing a need for doing that, and also just being able to implement and enforce policies more proactively. And then to mitigate the risk, as I mentioned earlier, on a materialized risk, customers are asking us that, since they've elevated the access, it's about, trust and verify, right? So being able to monitor what people are doing with that elevated access. For example, if more people have the ability to create a supplier and pay a supplier, did that risk materialize? Because we took off some of the safeguards we had in place, relying more on what we call compensating controls in the risk business, right? So are you relying on compensating controls? Are those compensating controls automated? For example, if you're doing bank recs the old-fashioned way in spreadsheet, could that be automated by looking at your bank transactions and your journal entries and doing that automated reconciliation? So your finance staff that's also remote can free up and focus more on important issues like understanding the assets and liabilities on your balance sheet and doing more variance analysis. Same thing with suppliers. You may be switching suppliers. You may have supplier information switching, like bank accounts. That's an opportunity for fraud and risk. For example, if somebody has access to make changes supplier bank accounts, did they go and put a employee or friend's bank account? So when the automated payment batch runs, it goes out there and produces the wrong results. And we're still mandated by data privacy policies. Data protection is just as important as it was before COVID-19. And so we're seeing, customers concerned about CCPA, which is the California law, not to mention GDPR in Europe, which is impacting a number of our multinational global customers. And I actually have another webinar later on today with a group out of UK to talk about data protection and how, especially in the healthcare sector, how that's impacting our customers. And then process controls around your key processes. So I'll just pick on 2 or 3 here. Financial close is one that's getting a lot of attention from our customers to just kind of streamline and automate that more, so they don't fall back on their external reporting to their stakeholders. Procurement, changing quite a bit, the process and the flows, and so being able to streamline, automate the procurement process more. Document management, people, how do you onboard new employees and offboard if you need to? So, all of those workflows are not built into many of the current systems that customers have, so they need to quickly adopt a streamlined self-service workflow where possible, so the HR folks, the finance folks, the purchasing folks can get all the work done in less time and do it more efficiently without creating additional risks to the business. And then dashboards on the top of all that. So Safe Insight is our predictive analytics tool that can go across any of those other objects within the SafePath platform and combine that with the objects, another data source like your ERP system, which is through our tool in green on the left, which is called Data Probe. So Data Probe will actually take a snapshot of, let's say, your supplier object in your Oracle e-business suite or Oracle Cloud or SAP or whatever you have, and it's going to look at, for example, the OFAC list if you're onboarding a new supplier, or if you use a third-party service like Dun & Bradstreet or Dow Jones, they have supplier third-party risk management type services. So it'll check that against the service and then give you a response whether that supplier should be onboarded or put on hold till further investigation is conducted. Same thing with in banking industries, there's a need for anti-money laundering, so know your customer policies. So you leverage this platform to just streamline that onboarding of not just employees and staff, but also customers and suppliers as you reorganize and move towards a resilience framework with the reopening of businesses and economies. So Insight tools are very helpful for that, and they give you the flexibility to address new risks proactively and assess those risks in the process as well.